I wanted to ask you, you were talking about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Do you know which day is the most challenging day for an entrepreneur?
Every day.
Every day.
Did I get that right?
You got it right. Every day. Being an entrepreneur is a tough journey. Things are breaking, things are on fire as you're going home. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. It takes a special breed of human to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers, they're dreamers. Entrepreneurs are constantly living at the edge of their comfort zone, right? They have this burning desire to take their life to the next level. And there's all this distraction and temptation to live that lifestyle or to go all in and hustle, right? To get what we want. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves why. Like, why do you want that? Like, really be honest with yourself as to why you're doing what you're doing.
Hello folks, welcome to My First Business. I'm Naeem Pervez and this podcast is for entrepreneurs, young or old, who are looking to improve the way that they look after their business. Each episode is designed to be like a conversation with a mentor that you never had, and you'll find inspiration, guiding principles, and possibly some solutions to your current business problems. We talk about the lows, like wanting to shut it all down, and we talk about the highs, like starting your second or your third or your fourth successful business, and also everything in between.
This episode was a therapy session for me with a man who spent several years in the darkest of places. You're going to meet Dhiren Harchandani, who's had 20 years of experience in building and scaling and exiting multiple business ventures in 5 different industries, but his success had come at a cost. He was making decisions which eventually led him spiraling down to his rock bottom where he spent a lot of his years. Now, my dear listener, you and I both know of entrepreneurs that are still trapped, but not Dhiren. He persisted on finding a way out. He worked on what he calls his inner game, and he ended up becoming his life's own transformation architect. He started borrowing the wisdom of the likes of Michael Singer and Dr. Joe Dispenza, and his new life had begun. He'd essentially created a blueprint of how to build a sustainable business, which for entrepreneurs like you and I is super important to know and to hear his perspective. So in his new life, Dhiren has now coached and mentored entrepreneurs whose combined revenue is about $2.3 billion. And he does that under his Superhuman coaching brand. And in this episode, you will see the nuggets of the lessons on transformation and leadership and mindset. And oh yeah, when he's not helping businesses become more productive and creative, he's training for ultra running races or competing in Ironmans or climbing mountains. We climbed a few mountains in this conversation. Here are some of the highlights of the things Dhiren and I talked about. We talked about his first business, his arbitrage business on eBay as a teenager. We spoke about why it's easier to trade with other people's money and what Pac-Man taught him. He told me the story of creating a business for which there wasn't an existing license category. We talked about the process of shutting down a failing business. He warned me why raising funds can potentially become a liability. He told me about having 4 coaches and 2 mentors all simultaneously. We talked about how to achieve maximum focus in this heavily distracted world, and we spoke about how to set circuit breakers in risky ventures and much, much more. As always, I think you'll find a lot of inspiration here. I hope you listen and re-listen to this episode just when you need it the most. So without much further ado, here's my conversation with Dhiren Harchandani on the EO series of the My First Business podcast.
This episode is brought to you by the Entrepreneurs Organization. Now, before I tell you what they do, first, let me tell you the numbers behind Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO for short. So they started in 1987. They've currently got 17,000 influential business owners as their members, spread across 213 chapters in 60 plus countries worldwide. They've been in the UAE since 1997 and have 119 members here, with a median member sales of roughly $4 million. And altogether, the total number of people employed by their members is over 23,000. And they've got members from all sorts of industries, including technology, healthcare, oil and gas, real estate, hospitality, jewelry, communications, logistics, travel. I could really go on. Mind blown yet? Now, here's what EO is actually all about. Here's what you get for being a member of EO, or here's what they do for you. EO in UAE provides an effective platform for networking, education, and support for business owners. The entrepreneurial journey can be lonely, and I can attest to that. And with an economy that changes on a dime, it can be hard to know what your next move should be. And that's where EO comes in with their support. One of the key benefits of membership is access to a robust calendar of events, including workshops, social events, and learning opportunities. So you get a ton of networking opportunities as well as a chance to learn from experts in your own field. EO also offers a mentorship program, so they pair you up with experienced business leaders who can offer guidance and support as you grow your own business. So for me, I've personally or vicariously benefited a lot from being in the EO network through their accelerator program, of which my partner is a part of. And if you're a business owner, tired of taking on your challenges all alone and are looking for unique networking opportunities, along with structured support through accountability groups and mentors, well, you can either start a podcast like I did, or if you don't want to do that, I highly encourage you to apply to EO. I'll leave a link for you in the show notes. And if you're not fully convinced yet, I'll be bringing on business owners on this podcast that are currently members of EO, including today's guest, so you can get a sneak peek of what you're getting. Dhiren, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Naeem.
I wanted to ask you right at the start, I'm just curious about this. I wanted to see which of these three names you would relate to the most. And when I say relate, whose words, messaging, or ideas would you say you most closely kind of relate to? So I'll give you three names. You pick one. You can pick all three. Number one, Michael Singer. Number two, Robin Sharma. Number three, Jay Shetty.
Did you look this up?
No, I didn't, but
Very good.
I do my research.
Michael Singer, absolutely, hands down. Untethered Soul, The Crazy Roommates. I mean, it's been transformative. That book for me is probably the most transformative book that I have read. Every time I read that book, it's a different book, and it teaches me something different every single time. So, Michael Singer.
Yeah, I worked through his. So I haven't read the book, but I've worked on the workbook. Did you know there's a workbook that accompanies that? And it's so Alina really loved that book. A lot of my other friends have recommended it to me, and I went straight for the workbook for some reason. And boy, does it really tear into you slowly but surely. And I still haven't completed. It's taken me a year, and I'm still like halfway through.
Is it one of those where it's something you want to take your time with?
If you do, it'll be to your own disservice too. So you wanna get yourself through the book as much as you can, because you can spend a lot of time kind of overthinking the concepts too. And the whole point of the book is not to overthink, but to feel and be. Yeah, exactly. To be, right? Yeah. So your force is, he gives you very limited space to write your answer. He gives you a prompt, and then he gives you a limited space. And I usually find it's a perfect amount of space to get it out. And then it's up to you on how you choose to absorb that information, whether you go for a walk after, and he doesn't give you, like, I wish he did that too, like after you write your answer, please go for a walk or something like that, because I feel drained after a couple of pages of doing that. But I also thought he would be the first choice for you because of your technical background and his technical background too, as in his software company that he does on the side. And
he's got a great story. Yeah.
I would love to learn more about him. I have his talks on Spotify on repeat every once in a while, so I can kind of revisit him. But I just generally wanted to open the conversation about the giants on whose shoulders you stand on yourself too, Michael Singer being one of them. There's one more name that you mentioned right before we started recording.
I did.
Let me see if I get this right. Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's been a distant mentor for a number of years, and I've had the privilege of meeting him, learning from him. I've read all his books. As a matter of fact, next week I'm flying to the States to spend some time with him in a program that he's put together called NCS, Neuro Change Solutions. And so he's been someone that I've been following for a number of years. His techniques, his mindsets, his ways of thinking, his methodologies have really been transformative for me in my life and my business.
What was the most recent nugget or transformation that you felt like?
You're going straight there, aren't you?
What was the recent unlock? Because I know it's fresh in your mind. It just recently happened, right?
Yes. So in January, I was. He has these retreats that he holds all over the world, and these retreats are, as soon as they're announced, they sell out within, a few seconds. It's one of those retreats. Like you need to be in front of your computer, refreshing the browser. As soon as it's announced, within a few minutes, it's gone.
It's like a Taylor Swift concert.
Exactly. And I got really lucky. I got into his retreat, his 8-day retreat in Colombia in January. And over the 8 days, there are a number of things that happen. So let me take a step back. So the reason Joe Dispenza resonates with me is because I grew up in a spiritual background. And in spirituality and in religion, the approach is very much, you'll see it when you believe it, right? You need to believe. You need to have conviction. And then you'll see it. And that's how I was programmed and conditioned. And it was very beneficial in my formative years, without a doubt. But more recently, I've started asking questions like, how do we really know, right? And with Dr. Joe's approach, it's very much see it, right? Because he takes a very scientific approach. He's at the intersection of neuroscience and spirituality. And so his whole approach is, here's the data, right? Here are the markers of people that have been doing the work. Now that you see the data, right? Now believe it. So I'm being programmed in some ways in a different way, right? In a way wherein it's now, appealing to my cognitive mind, my more discerning, logical side of my brain that says,
the 21st century mind.
Absolutely. Here's the data. It's clear, right? Data point after data point after data point. You see the markers going from the top left of the chart to the bottom right. So you see people healing, they're transforming. Now believe it. And so when you now start dropping into the work and start doing the work, you've now, because I've been conditioned from you'll see it when you believe it. Now I'm, on the other side of the spectrum. So I feel like I'm getting that 360 view. And so the impact and the transformation is far deeper. So in January, I was in Colombia for his retreat, his long retreat. And I think it was the 4th day, we did a 5-hour meditation. You think, people like usually, I come out of this thinking, whenever I do a long endurance kind of meditation, I come out and think, oh, that felt like 5 minutes, or that felt like 2 minutes. But this time, Naeem, I couldn't even really quantify the time. Like, it's almost like time did not exist. Well, time did not exist in that moment. So came back out after 5 minutes, after 5 hours, which felt like 5 minutes. It didn't even feel like 5 minutes. It just felt like time did not exist. And when I came back, my body felt different. I just felt really different. And I couldn't make sense of it. So, and you know that sensation when you haven't brushed your teeth, it's uncomfortable? So it was that feeling. It was uncomfortable, not in a bad way, but just in a really uncomfortable, foreign kind of way in the body. And after a few days, as I started thinking and reconciling and journaling and speaking to people who've been doing the work for a number of years, I realized the unlock was that during that meditation, I processed a lot of emotion, a very specific emotion that I was carrying that I didn't even know it was there. So what happens is we habituate certain feelings in our body because we've been carrying it for so long, we don't even know it's there. And so for a long time, I was carrying an emotion that I didn't know existed until after the unlock. And I came back, and within a few days, it took a few days for it to really unlock. But when it unlocked, my clarity got sharper. My energy levels went through the roof. My sleep improved. Everything shifted. The way I saw my three-dimensional world had shifted significantly. It was such a transformative experience.
Almost like a new person walking out.
You know, it's trite when people say that. I feel like a new person, but
Yeah.
it's so true. Like I felt my interactions were different. The words, the conversation that I was having in the privacy of my mind had shifted. It was a different conversation.
Wow. And you feel that till today, from January up until now, you still feel.
Yeah. So I do a lot of NLP work on myself and for people I work with, my clients. And once certain emotions have been processed, we have memories from the past that carry certain emotions,
Yeah.
right? The only reason the past exists is because we're thinking about it at this moment. And so there were certain memories from the past that now when I think about those memories, it doesn't hold the same charge. I still remember it. He didn't take my ability away to remember those memories, but the emotions associated with those memories isn't the same. So yeah, completely different feeling.
Yeah.
The energy.
I was
Yeah,
speaking
it's
with
different.
Alina a few days ago. It was yesterday maybe. But we were just discussing. So have you read this book called The Body Keeps Score?
Yes.
So I read that last year, changed my mind completely on how these things affect your body. And we were just talking about it yesterday. And she said, I feel like you haven't worked on your trauma because I've had incidents with family or just life in general that I've kind of pushed away to the side and kind of moved on. And, it's shown up in weird places, me trying to deal with it. And it's shown up in like health as well. And she brought it up. She's like, you know what? You probably haven't fully dealt with some of the stuff that you've seen or faced or have had to work through. And this arose from the time where I was telling her I need to go on a retreat of some sort. I need to have some alone time. I do get generally energized more so when I'm alone anyway. I lie more on the introverted spectrum than the extroverted.
It's good awareness.
But like a mix of both. But I gain energy by being alone. I lose energy faster when I'm with people. I love people, but I can't have too much of them. So after this interview, I'm going for a nap. I do need to recover. And that just made me think, and this is funny because you're talking about this now. This is a sign for me to go work these things out because I didn't grow up with this mentality as well of naming and having the science behind what you're feeling and like understanding the cognitive versus physical versus spiritual and the how it all intertwines. And so that's a sign for me. Can you, before we move on, can you name the emotion that you didn't think that you had, that you unlocked?
Guilt.
Okay, interesting. I won't dig into that because we can spend a whole conversation talking about this.
But most people will have one of two.
Yeah.
They'll either, so there are 5 major emotions. So it'll be anger, hurt, sadness. But most people that feel guilt will either feel guilt or shame. And for me, it was guilt from certain things that I should have done in the past that I did not do, or a certain way that I should have treated myself, right? Again, it's all inner game. It's all about reconciling and accepting myself where I am today and not holding myself, responsible.
Hostage almost.
Hostage or a victim. Yeah.
Well,
guilt is a heavy one.
I will bring it back because I think we might open up that can again. But speaking of the past and things in the past, what were you doing on eBay in college? Was that your first ever business?
That was, it wasn't a business
Yeah.
in that sense. Meaning I wasn't incorporated, but I was. What I was doing was I was trading. I had a really good relationship with Garth, who worked for CDW. Have you heard of CDW?
No.
CDW is the biggest, one of the biggest technology, hardware, software sellers in the U.S.
Okay.
And I had a good relationship with this guy who basically had access to hardware. And I had, because I grew up in the Philippines, I had relationships in the Philippines as well. And eBay was something that, because my dad spent a lot of time on eBay in the early days. He's quite the pioneer when something new comes out. And so I started spending a lot of time, and I saw an arbitrage between the price that I could access certain PCs, computers, hardware, you name it, laptops, between what I could get access from Garth versus what it was selling for on eBay. So I played that arbitrage, which went on for a number of years. Yeah, so that was my first foray into business.
You know, when you're at that age, so I remember something similar when I was about 16. This is before college. I did a arbitrage business, and the way I would define my arbitrage is I didn't pay any of the costs for the product. My dad did, and I earned all the revenue. So I was selling pirated CDs of some popular TV series franchises. That TV series had 6 people in it, 3 guys, 3 girls living in New York. You can guess who it is. But yeah, I had DSL at home. One of the first kids.
DSL.
Yeah, remember that? Remember that? Oh, that ages me. But I was downloading this stuff like series after series. Got my dad to buy me empty DVDs. Had a DVD burner at home. Spread the word at school. Like, hey, been watching Friends. I want to watch it. I'm like, I'll get you a CD. 10 dirhams. 10 dirhams when you're 16 is a lot of money. You make 5 sales, 50 dirhams. Whew, that's my whole month.
And it plants
of, like,
the seed, right?
Yeah.
The seed of making money, like understanding the value of how difficult it is to make money. Right? And that's what it taught me.
Yeah.
You know, when I got to college, I'd never done my laundry. Like I learned how to do my laundry my first year in college. I mean, I'm sure that story is not unique, but it just still, when I think about it, we live in bubbles, right? I mean, growing up in the Far East, living in Dubai, I think we live in bubbles, and that's not really what reality is about. Yeah.
It's true, because you kind of figured out your arbitrage on your own or with the help of your dad and knowing Garth. Mine was a request from the customer. So my first customer actually told me to do this. He's like, if you do this, I'll pay you. So I never intended to do it. And then that same friend, he's a bit more with a zeal of like money. His family's surrounded with like talks about money all the time. My family, we never grew up talking about money. Which is also why I've never developed a lot of comfort talking about money. It's recently been changing. But then he came to me 2 years ago. We changed school. We went to a school we went from like a middle-class school to like a well-to-do school in 12th grade, because my dad improved his position at work over the years. So we were able to afford better only for my last year. And he's like, hey, you want to make some money? I'm like, how? He's like, let's organize a barbecue. And we made all the kids in our school like pay like a nominal fee. It was like 30, 40 dirhams, which is nothing for them. Our cost per person was like 5 dirhams to organize a barbecue. We netted the difference and we bought ourselves some stuff. But ever since then, and going to university became the same habit, right? How can I make my own? How can I stop waiting for the handout? Because I did get pocket money from dad and stuff. I was privileged enough to get that. But at the same time, you always want to see what you can kind of muster out. But did that for you become your first turning point, you think? Because you are going to go on and we're going to discuss you becoming a serial entrepreneur over time. But do you think that was the first time you thought of yourself like, hey, you know what? At some point, I'm going to be running businesses. Did that vision come to your mind at that point? Or was that just...
I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad was the proverbial $100 in his back pocket, left everything he had, and started from scratch. And so, you know, I saw that at a very young age. I saw the struggle. I saw the hustle. And that definitely planted seeds. So I think that's where it started. Also, my dad started taking me to the office, and I used to be part of an assembly line. So he brought the PC to the Philippines in the early 80s. And so he would bring parts in from Hong Kong back then. And we would bring it to the Philippines and we would assemble it. Excuse me. We would assemble it. And so I was part of that assembly line where I would put the motherboard on the case and then put the graphics card and the memory chip. And then I could see that it went from coming in a box, in a container, to then being assembled, to then being in schools and government sectors and offices. And so I saw that whole life cycle at a very young age. And I could see money coming in to the business, right? Back then a lot of it was cash and checks. And I was close to the register. And so that probably planted the seed. If that didn't happen, I don't know if I would have, played the arbitrage game when I was in college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that exposure was definitely
that was
a turning
key.
point.
Yeah.
But then you ended up in the corporate world when you
And then
started your career.
I
So,
did.
right?
Yeah. I started my career in consulting
Yeah.
during the .com boom.
Boom slash.
The expansion. The expansion. I timed it perfectly. I graduated from college in '99, and the .com bubble started forming at that point. And the Valley was frenetic at that point, right? I mean, there was this joke that if you had a business plan, you toss it up in the air, and before it lands on the ground, you're funded.
Yeah.
It was the days of Webvan. It was an exciting time to be in the Valley.
And you were there. You were in the Bay Area.
I was in the thick of it. Not only was I in the thick of it, but I was in the thick of it as a consultant. So Naeem, what that means is, I would be put on assignment with, a very large Fortune 500 company like Nortel, right? And then within 6 months, I'll be, on a table like this with a couple of founders, and I would be brought in to take their vision and implement the infrastructure to enable that vision. So I saw the full spectrum from, Fortune 500 to small startups and everything in between, and got firsthand front row seats to the innovator's dilemma, right? Why is it that big companies are not able to innovate, right? Having change management systems in place, bureaucracy, layers and layers of middle management, which just hamstrung innovation. And, at the same time, I would see why and how small startups were able to innovate at such a rapid rate. And to see that within the first few years of my journey was formative. It was really formative.
What was the most exciting project at that time as a consultant? What did you see break through the roofs of everything?
I was consulting for a company called, well, actually, a couple of exciting companies. One was, have you heard of Namco?
No.
Namco was the founder or the developer of Pac-Man.
Okay.
The classic game, right?
Okay.
So I was there for 6 months, and I saw firsthand how
now I remember the logo.
game
It used to
development,
come before and after the game. Okay.
Yeah, how game development was being done. And that was fascinating because you're working with people that are creative, right? And how they would troubleshoot the game. That was really interesting. So I started learning about, not just the development side, but the actual troubleshooting side of things as well.
Yeah.
Then another exciting opportunity was with a company called Susquehanna. They are, so you know what options trading is?
I used to trade options for 7 years in a past life.
Ah.
Foreign exchange options only.
Okay, here we go. So this will resonate with you. So Susquehanna was the largest options trading firm in the world. So 60% of the global options trade went through their specialist desks or market makers that worked for the company that were all over the world. And so, anyone can trade. You know this. Anyone can trade equity, but to trade options, you have to have a quantitative skill set, right? And not everyone can trade options. Now, Susquehanna was one of the best firms on Wall Street. So if you traded options for Susquehanna, you were one of the best in the world. And so as I got to know the traders, I would play poker with them, I would go out golfing with them. And as I started getting to know them, I would ask them, so what do you trade in your PA? Give me a tip. Like, this is when the markets were going parabolic, right? Bottom left, upper right of the chart, the markets were going bananas. So I asked them, what do you trade? Give me a tip. It was such an important lesson to learn that here were the best traders in the world. And in their personal account, they traded nothing. And what made them the best traders was that they were trading other people's money. As soon as they started trading their own funds, their own capital, emotions started seeping in. And all of a sudden, they're looking at it from a very different perspective, and they're no longer the best in the world. So that was such an important lesson. I know your question was some of the exciting projects, but this was a transformative lesson. In terms of projects, I was consulting for a company called Altion Web Systems. They came out with one of the first switches. One of the first switches that we use on the internet. They ended up getting bought by Nortel.
What's a switch?
A switch is you have computers all over the world, right? In order for them to speak to each other, right? I'll distill it down to
the layman
essence,
listening
to the essence. The switch allows them to switch from one computer. It switches the packet from one computer to one node to the other, right? So it moves packets around.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they were the first ones to come up with
They were
that.
one of the first ones.
Man,
So
you were right at the...
I was at the heart of it. It was really exciting.
Wow.
And then to see the eventual implosion was also exciting.
Did anyone see that coming? The bust?
No.
I mean, it wouldn't have been a bust if everyone saw it coming.
I don't think everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid at that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone was really benefiting. I mean, everyone rode that wave.
Can I ask you something? Is there something having experienced that, is there something today that you think is being a wave that's being ridden really high, knowing what you know now about the dot-com bust and knowing how the feeling was? Is there something today that you think is on the verge of losing its steam pretty badly, whether it be technology or any other kind of business, industry or anything like that? Anything comes to mind?
Well, AI being the most obvious.
Huh. Do you think everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid?
I do believe everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid. At the same time, I do believe in the power of AI. It is going to be it's already transformative without a shadow of a doubt. But I think the rate in which companies are coming in, innovating in that space, there's bound to be some level of correction, some, a cleansing of sorts. Other than AI, it already happened in the crypto space. That was also NFC, crypto, that already happened. But yeah, I think AI definitely will see a similar, I don't want to call it.
Right-sizing.
Yeah, I think right-sizing is the right word, yeah.
Right? Because the hype is always, it's so much easier to create hype these days than it used to be, I guess, 20 years ago, let's say, or 30 years ago. Now the hype and the bandwagon and the chance to seem relevant to pitch into the conversation that is hot right now makes it seem, and then money starts flowing into AI startups, which, Google takes one look at them and be like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Oh, you're building search. Oh, that's cute. Guess what I've been doing for 30 years and what I can plug in. Like, oh, do you have a Google Photos app? Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And if you just look at few products within the Google portfolio, they can... Sleeping giants, right? Maybe they needed this to wake up. Yes, maybe they were down in the innovator's dilemma where they didn't realize
we're so large. How do we innovate? And now this is impetus for them to kind of go.
It's funny you mentioned that they just released Bard.
Yeah. Is it here yet?
It's
in
here.
Dubai?
It's here.
Because the last time I checked, they said like not in your location yet. That was a few weeks ago.
It's here. And as a matter of fact, I put in Bard, I said, what did Saleh say during his interview
really?
with
Okay.
Naeem on my first business podcast?
Uh-huh.
And it came up with
With a summary?
with the summary.
I like it.
Yeah. So ChatGPT can't do that.
It can in a turnaround way.
It I don't think it can, and the reason it can't is because it's not connected to the open web,
Yeah.
right? And
But
it's got
here's
information
a
till
hack for
01.
that.
Yeah.
I recorded with Roma last week or 2 weeks ago. I put a transcript in a PDF file. I put the file on a Google Drive. I shared the file with ChatGPT's email. Then I pasted the link in ChatGPT and it's like, hey, can you read this transcript? Like, yes, I read it. It looks like an interview that you had with Roma. I'm like, yes. Can you give me, what Roma said about family businesses? She's like, ChatGPT starts writing summaries like, oh, Roma thinks. And I'm like, wow, this is so good. I have a second brain almost. But switching gears. So I'm going to start naming a few things just for fun's sake. So Latitude Systems, MB Group, My Building SaaS, Retail Shoe Business, Zenbox, Nycrack, OTC Crypto Trading, Inner Game Consulting. Fair to say that you're a serial entrepreneur. I wanted to ask you, when you work on multiple businesses, do you work on a few at any given time? Do you work one at a time to build it up, to hand it over? Like, how are you? And the reason I'm asking is I visualize myself in the future as being a serial entrepreneur, in the sense that like my visual consists of a holding company that I've created, and then there's charts going into different ventures, and then my real estate holdings and this and that. And it's all up on my vision board, and I look at it every once in a while. I'm like, oh, this is that. This one I'll be very active in. This one, 10%. This one I'm sleeping partner. How have you split time over the years of you being an entrepreneur into the different businesses? When do you decide to walk away from something, give it to someone else? And I'll ask follow-up questions about your roles in these businesses too. But yeah, how do you manage time between multiple businesses? I can barely keep up with one now.
That's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, and you have to be very clear on how you're going to divide your time. I've had to be very clear on how I'm going to divide my time. Mm-hmm. I haven't found a science behind it, because inevitably, as a serial entrepreneur, what do? We solve problems, right? We put out fires. So in the businesses that you mentioned, a lot of them were early stage businesses that needed my presence at the operational level. I did not have a team that could handle all the firefighting. Ultimately, with one business in particular, for example, actually multiple businesses, we were always bumping into regulation. And regulation was something that only I could handle. And when it came to regulation, that was a big fire. It was a problem that needed to be solved. And so if I'm working on something here and something breaks out here, I'm in reactive mode, right?
It's like a dam that's breaking.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's like a switch. Like, okay, there's a problem here. Now I need to move. You're literally switching in real time. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, then the consequences have a direct impact on the business. So to answer your question, ideally what I would have liked to do, and I got to a point where I was starting to do that, where I would divide my days into different businesses. So on Monday and Tuesday, it would be Zenbox. On Wednesday, it would be Nycrack. On Thursday, it would be this business. On Friday, I would focus on just thinking. So ideally, that would be the approach. Mm-hmm. But in reality, that was never the case.
I'm asking this because this is something I struggle with. So I have, let's say I have a 1 to N business and a 0 to 1 business. 1 to N is the current agency that's already up and running. It's functioning. It's way past inception, profitable, but it needs to scale now. and then this podcast being another source. Like it's the genesis of my media empire that I'm trying to build. And splitting time, I tried that. I tried the Monday for agency, Tuesday for this. But then on podcast day, there'd be a fire from the agency that I need to put off, and it throws me off. And then I kept having to switch things through. I haven't found my own scientific way to split my time up. What I'm considering now is seasons, in the sense that, month of May, Alina, please look after the agency. I will rarely be available. Like if it, unless it's failing, don't call me.
Yeah.
But I need to spend time like on the podcast, just take it from, because it's in this baby stages. It's a 0 to 1 kind of business, and need to set up a lot of the groundwork and innovate a lot on this space. So I'm going to give that a try. Have you tried that? Like kind of once you have an operator or a partner, you walk away from it, and how do you have that discussion with your partners?
Yeah, so it's not about the one-to-end businesses that worked. That approach definitely worked because everything was predictable, right?
Yeah.
There was a team, there was a structure in place. When there's a fire, there's a change management, there's a process, there are policies in place. It was a lot more mature in terms of the cadence and the rhythm on how the company operated. But the 0 to 1s, when you have multiple 0 to 1s running at the same time, then how do you prioritize one over the other? It's almost, I would say, I don't want to say impossible, but it's very, very challenging. You have to be adaptable in the situation to be able to switch in real time, right? And know that that's okay, and develop the muscles and the perseverance and the grit and the resilience to be able to handle, that emotional roller coaster that comes with moving from one thing to another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because again, we will try to relate most of this stuff to the inner game, because I can see the importance of that, having now going through, these kind of journeys myself. But the emotional roller coaster of 0 to 1, when you have a week fully planned, you're fresh on a Sunday, you have a coffee, you go to a cafe, and you're like, I'm going to plan my week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then something happens on Tuesday that wrecks you.
Yeah,
derails you, right? You had this vision for your 0 to 1 business, and an assumption came unproven, or like, something broke an assumption. And you're like, I need to rethink the whole thing. And like persevering and leading through that. I've heard multiple ways to deal with it. I wonder, and it's going to be context specific, right? But have you ever come close to shutting things down, walking away from things? Have you been close? Have you done that yourself? Or do you kind of, with the businesses that I listed, are they all still running? I know you've exited a few, but was there one that you shut down?
Absolutely.
Which one was that?
So going back to, I wanted to ask you. You were talking about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Do you know which day is the most challenging day for an entrepreneur?
Every day.
Every day.
Did I get that right?
You got it right. Every day. Every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of shutting down a business, so ZenBox was a concept that I thought of in 2013. And I saw this was after the exit of my building. And because it was in the same space, it was within the real estate space, I saw that there was a gap that was not being fulfilled in the residential buildings, in residential and commercial buildings. And we could see it from the platform, from the requests that were coming up from residents and tenants.
Do you want to describe those two businesses, like My Building?
So My Building was a software as a service platform for real estate condo management. Homeowners Association management is what it's called here. So think of all the services that you would have to provide to your residents. These services are provided by an association called the Homeowners Association. And they would need software to be able to do that. So think of it as an ERP, CRM for real estate.
It's in the back end. Like this is not something the
It's
homeowners
both.
see?
It's
Okay.
basically a B2B2C
Okay.
platform.
So it's when I lived in the Greens, for example, Imar had a portal which I
Correct.
could log into
Yes.
and organize myself,
Yes.
whether it's activities or
Or-
maintenance requests or
Correct.
anything.
And
Okay.
and you would use that platform to pay your maintenance dues and a whole slew of other services.
Got it.
So that's what my building did. And through that, we could see that there was a gap and there were pain points that were being experienced by residents in buildings. And so I thought of this concept called Zenboxed, wherein we deployed these physical lockers, a physical locker in the building that provided various concierge services from laundry, dry cleaning to leather therapy to delivery, point-to-point delivery, for example. So we offered a range of services using the locker as a last mile of delivery. Yeah. And so what that did was it consolidated all the service providers that would come into a building, because one of the pain points that was being experienced in a lot of these buildings was there's just too many service providers coming in and we don't feel safe. Our kids are in the lobby, for example, and you've got all these service providers. And so we thought, okay, this is a real opportunity because we have relationships in these buildings. We can deploy these lockers and provide the services ourselves. So that was what Zenbox did. So we had a good run. As we were getting into the challenge with that business was that when we incorporated, we went to the economic department and they didn't have a license for us. But as an entrepreneur, right, you say, okay, well, who else do I need to speak to, right? So the first line of the economic department then sends you to the second line, and the second line says, no, sorry, I can't do it. And you go to the third, and next thing I know, I'm all the way up the flagpole, and I'm sitting with the person who makes the decision. And so he's like, what is this concept about? So we did a pitch, right? He said, this is what we do. They're like, yeah, license doesn't exist. And on the spot, he's like, okay, take this license and this license. And, with these two licenses, it's still not exactly what you're doing, but I'll approve it.
Close enough.
Close enough.
Yeah.
So it was approved, but every year we would have to go to him to get it approved. And it got to a point wherein lockers started becoming really ubiquitous. But the locker business, as it was gaining traction, it was not the same model that we had. Our model was put a locker everywhere, right? But the locker system or the locker providers now are putting it in dense communities, right? Because those lockers, in terms of CapEx, is significantly higher than the CapEx of our lockers. So the licensing got to a point where it was prohibitive based on our commercial model. And then we were going into the pandemic and people weren't leaving their homes, right? So a lot of the services that we provided, right, weren't in
No need
demand.
for them,
they weren't in demand. Demand was
I
definitely
wasn't doing laundry or dry cleaning.
or dry cleaning
For
or
2
leather,
years.
or any of the services.
Yeah.
And so we then went back to them and they said, now the requirements are going to be A, B, and C. And it was a front end cost, which was significantly more than what we could absorb given the market was slowing down.
Yeah.
So we took a call that it was time to wrap it up.
Yeah, especially with the overheads, right? Like you owned the physical lockers.
Yeah, we owned the
And
lockers.
they're depreciating assets as
Correct.
well.
Correct.
And then the services on top of that.
Yeah.
Bye Zenbox then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it easy? Was it easy to walk away from it?
It's never easy to walk away from a business that you start.
Yeah. Because don't you have the ego kind of saying like, I can figure this out. Okay, it's a challenge. Fine, I'll figure it out. Let me iterate. At some point, you got to pull the plug.
At some point, you have to pull the plug and you have to ask yourself if what's your why? Why are you doing it? Right? That was a business that I felt it was a natural thing to do after my exit. And I thought because we had all these relationships in place, we could leverage those relationships and grow very quickly, which we did.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the ego definitely gets in the way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think about it till this day. I think about whether we could have pushed harder and found a way to make it work.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's regret, right?
In what
And
sense?
I mean, if I continue thinking I could have, I should have,
Yeah.
I would have done it differently, then I wouldn't be able to be where I am today, right? And doing what I'm doing today, or seeing opportunities, you know, independently of that experience, right? At some point, we have to move on.
Yeah, you made space for something else that showed up in your
Yeah.
life that wouldn't have if you never gave up on it.
Yeah.
Like I think there's such a stigma even in careers too. I've been guilty of jumping around quite a bit, mostly because I just have a variety of interests and I can't keep myself down. The longest thing I did was options trading, and that was more of a FX options, but for hedging only. So I wasn't trading it to make my clients money. It was our Fortune 500 clients that had exposures in multiple countries, and we needed to take the risk out of their receivables and payables over longer terms. So similarly, if you ask me what I traded on my FX portfolio, nothing, zero, nothing. I just knew enough. But I did that for 7 years, moved into tech, then moved into accounting, then moved into thing. And at some point, I met a friend here in a coding lab because I randomly decided I want to become an engineer. And he said, "Hey man, I looked at your LinkedIn." He's like, "I can't tell what you are." It's like, you're not consistent. He's like, "You don't need to do that. Like, make it simple. Make everything the same." And I said, "No, but that's me." Like I first, it took me a few days to learn that it's okay to be me. First few days was like, he's right. You know, if I apply for another job, they're going to say the same thing. Who is this guy? He doesn't stick around in one industry. He keeps trying different things. But that's when I first realized I'm like, hey, it's okay to be me. Second, that I have made space for new things in my life that would never have existed if I didn't jump up. Yes, it was uncomfortable leaving something I'm very comfortable with. But a third time, that's when I realized like I have the makings of a serial entrepreneur, I think, which means that
That's all that matters, what you think.
I think, yeah, I'm a very delusional that way, but I love it. I love my own delusion. But I had, like, let's break it down into 3 different kinds of entrepreneurs for this conversation. There's serial entrepreneurs, there's repeat entrepreneurs, and there's, I don't know the name for this, multi-entrepreneurs. Let's talk about repeat entrepreneurs first. Repeat entrepreneurs, something similar. They do an industry, they get really good at it, exit the business, then do a business in the same industry and keep borrowing from the previous to go. And, you're a repeat entrepreneur. Then you've got the multi-entrepreneur ideas guy. I got the ideas, someone else run it for me, but I'm going to have my hands in like 5 or 6. But I'm, mostly silent. Just I'm the incubator, come to me for the ideas and the money, but you run the whole show. And then there's a serial entrepreneur. The way I look at it is like the one who has seasons. Like I'm going to spend a whole season building an ad agency, which is 3, 4, 5, 6 years or whatever. And then I'm going to have a season doing something completely different, like building a clothing brand from scratch or something like that. So I felt like, that change or walking away from things that were working well. I was paid pretty well as a derivatives trader, but sometimes you got to make space for other things. Now,
Absolutely.
Now I get to wear shorts and a t-shirt and not a tie.
You get to wear whatever you want.
I do. And I told my father-in-law this, when I quit. My father is a banker for life, retired now. But he was pretty happy. One of the reasons he agreed for the marriage between Alina and I was like, oh, you're a finance guy, I'm a finance guy, we'll get along. Okay. A year after marriage, I quit. And he's like, why? I was like, I just didn't want to wear a tie anymore. He's like, there's got to be a better reason. There's got to be a better reason. But moving on, I wanted to ask you also about advice. And advice is all contextual. As new entrepreneurs, Alina and I, we keep getting a ton of advice from people who've been there, done that, or are trying to do that as well. And I know EO has this whole just TALT framework where, you experience share and don't give advice. But at the same time, everyone outside of EO doesn't know of that framework. So we keep getting, whether it's through social media, whether it's through books, whether through people locally or abroad,
we keep getting advice. I wanted to ask you, it's not a curveball of a question, but what advice should I ignore? Can I safely ignore? Or let me rephrase that. What advice do you see commonly given to new entrepreneurs that you think is not right? Something that is, in our culture, it's permeating pretty well, but you look at, advice for new entrepreneurs, you're like, no, that one, I wish you don't listen to as a new entrepreneur. Is there anything that comes to mind?
I think right now it would probably have to do with funding. Right. I think a lot of entrepreneurs now are looking at a way to get funded. They're spending more time trying to find ways to raise capital or thinking about raising capital than rather proving that the idea, the concept, the business works. Right? Optimizing for short wins and bootstrapping your way to a point to the point where it works. You've mitigated the risk and now it's about scale, right? So one advice would be ignore advice around fundraising, right? If you need to fundraise immediately, right, then you haven't really proven the business, right? And if you haven't proven the business, then you haven't developed the conviction around the idea, right? It's all concept, it's all abstract, it's all in the air.
Yeah.
So I think bootstrapping it to the point where it's proven is the advice or the opposite of that is what I would ignore.
Yeah. Would it be fair to also say that if you are so hell-bent on raising funding before building, that when you do successfully raise funding, because right now is one of those times where you throw a business plan in the air and someone has capital to deploy into you, whether it's belief capital or something else, that you don't stay true to yourself and true to your own conviction and true to your own intuition when building something. Because I'm speaking from experience. That's one of the thoughts I had when raising or wanting to raise funding for, let's say, this podcast. Like, hey, I need to get someone to come in and pay for my studio costs for the whole year and then XYZ. But then I thought of the trap that would be too, because now what if I change my mind? What if I want to do things differently? Now, do I need buy-in from other people? Because when you're in that 0 to 1 phase, you're very fickle, I feel, as an entrepreneur. Like, you can have your vision, but your strength is in being able to change directions. But if you sold a bill of goods to an investor, then that probably gets harder, and you start doing a lot of compromises to yourself. And instead of building a business, you potentially build a trap for yourself.
Yeah, look, bringing in funding is bringing in liability, right? You're now liable to someone else, right? And when you're liable to someone else, now you have to compromise, right? And that's okay if you're at that stage where you can start compromising because you're no longer really proving the business, right? But when you're in the stage where you're proving the business and you're trying to get early wins, you have to move so fast, right? With ZenBox, we had to move so quickly that I've been thinking about this. What if we got early stage funding? Would we have been able to scale our way through the pandemic? Maybe. I don't know the answer to that question.
Or you could have made a bigger problem for yourself by holding on to a lot of lockers without any customers.
Or I could have made a bigger problem for myself, absolutely. Yeah. So we had to prove the model before we started thinking about that. So yeah, it is a trap. It can be a trap. At the same time, it can also lead to freedom. So I think it's finding the right balance. Timing is key. But I think until you've bootstrapped it to the point wherein you've gotten to the point wherein, okay, you know what? Now I need someone to take me to the next level, right? Or I need a partner, a strategic partner that can help me take it to the next level. Up to that point, and it's usually when you think about being at that point, it's further along. It's not usually at that point.
Yeah,
it's usually much further along. That's when it starts coming to play.
Yeah, no, that resonates. That makes sense. For this studio, for example, when we started in the old location, the first location, I didn't start it. Vok, you met outside, and started it. My ex-boss. I used to work for him, actually. I was his worst employee. I handed my resignation to him. But when he was building out that first studio, it was profitable from day one. Ran it for a year, super profitable. Could hardly get a seat. Like even when we're booking times with you, it's like 3-4 weeks away.
Yeah.
Because it's just fully packed. That we decided, or he decided to like, we need 3 more.
Yeah.
And at that point, he started raising funding, which made sense. If he had started early on, I think things would be a lot different. Now he has proof of concept, revenue to back it up, a model that works, operational system, people that are kind of know what their job is. There's a checklist for everything. And now it's going from like that N to 1 or 1 to N. And when he was raising funding and I invested in these particular studios, it was based on that. It was the fact that it's a proven concept. But if it was something new, if he was sitting on the couch and saying like, hey, I think this is going to be a great business, I would not be interested. And secondly, watching him kind of work through is really inspiring for me, in the sense that I've given the money and I said, don't ever talk to me. I'm not coming to the board meetings. take my chair on the meeting. Do what you're doing. I don't want to talk to me, because I know that, when you mentioned when you're taking funding, you're also taking a liability, like answering to someone. And I wanted to give him that freedom. Run with it. It's your idea. Don't let me bother. This is my play money. If you lose it, then no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
Switching gears again.
Yeah.
Business crew. One of the common things that I find about you EO folks that I've started to get to know over the last 1 year. So we've Alina's been a part of EOA start of last year. When we first started our business, we had these dreams of being these solopreneurs, the 1 to 2 person businesses. We felt like we could live on an island, just do our own thing, and little did we know that
Nomads.
Yeah, just do the whole thing. And that was the bill of goods that was sold to us by the online gurus in the online digital product world. More and more we realize, if you look under the hood, all of those people that are selling these dreams, very, very well connected to a group of very smart people working on similar things together, or with the right energy, but they never disclose that, right? When they're sharing their stories, to someone who's on the fringes and outside watching these stories, like, wow, a 2-person business making $1 million and 90% profit margin, I want to do that.
Yeah, of course. Sign me up.
Sign me up. Like, I don't have to talk to anyone. Like, yay, introverts win. But we've started noticing in the last 3 or 4 years, can't do squat alone. Got to know the right people. Got to have the right energy around you. Got to have the right ideas flowing. The osmosis that needs to happen by being in the right rooms. What has that looked like for you over your journey of entrepreneurship? Like, what role has your crew, your business crew played, and specifically those outside of your own business?
The tribe.
Yeah. What has that looked like for you? How has that evolved over the last few decades?
So, EO has been pivotal. It's been absolutely pivotal. I've made some really great friendships, relationships within EO. You've heard of Forum. Forum has been transformative for me.
Forum almost sounds like a cult. What Saleh was talking about, I was like, whoa, how do you get into that?
It can sound like a cult. It can feel like one as well. But it's transformative when you bring a group of people in a room and you check 2 boxes. And the first box is no judgment. Right? No matter what I say, there's this explicit and implicit understanding and belief that you will not judge me, I will not judge you. And when you check the second box, which is discretion, confidentiality, everything I share with you stays with you. It stays in this room, right? Magic happens. Magic happens, transformation happens, breakthroughs happen. So EO has been transformative for me. In terms of having a group of people around me, this is something that I've always put a lot of weight on making sure I have the right people around me. And when I say right people, I mean people who are very different from my background. very different from my the way I think, the way I approach life, problems, challenges. So I have 4 coaches. I have 4 coaches and 2 mentors. All bring a very different perspective into my life, but all really, really valuable perspective. And I have regular meetings with them. 4 of them are professional relationships. 2 of them are mentor relationships, wherein they are obliging me. But yeah, it's been pivotal, and keeping that cadence going, because we don't see ourselves accurately, right?
Yeah.
We don't see ourselves accurately. Sometimes, not sometimes, but most of the time, people have to hold a mirror in front of us and say, "Look, you've got blinders here, or you have this pattern that's recurring, right? Or have you considered this?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
When Alina started our business, right, she was a freelancer, so it was an accidental business. She was working solo until it got to a point where there were enough clients that she couldn't manage, too much on her plate. And that's when she decided to ask me to join forces. And when we created that partnership, it worked really well initially, right? Like we were able to add on to each other. It was a plus versus a times thing, because by plus I mean 0 plus 1 is 1, but 0 times 1 is still 0. So we had that kind of relationship going, and at some point we started getting into groupthink. So we'd both have the same bad idea together, and we'd both gung ho go into a bad idea with full speed. So you're going at double the speed with a bad idea.
Yeah.
And over time, we've started seeking people to break our groupthink, basically, or taking the devil's advocate. But it's nicer to have someone on the outside. I can kind of relate to that, and it's also about building thick skin and taking that feedback and working through what someone is saying from a very objective standpoint and not subjective one.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to someone that, I'm new into these kind of relationships, like into business mentors, for example? How do you become a good mentee? What role should I play as a mentee to derive the full impact of the relationship while being respectful to my mentor as well?
The most essential thing to be a good mentee is to follow up, right? It's to make sure that because in between sessions, right, if you're following up, you're maximizing on the benefit that you can get from that relationship. That's one, in no particular order. I would say
Sure.
that's the first thing is maximizing the communication to extract as much value as you can. The second would be around being really clear on what the goals are, right? What do you want to achieve, right? What are you optimizing for? So as I said, I have 4 coaches, 2 mentors. Both mentors, I'm working on different goals with each one, right? Based on their background and their experience. Like I have a mentor who is mentoring me on leadership. He's a phenomenal leader, right? And so all my goals are around developing my leadership, right? So being really clear on the goals allows you to be a great mentee, right? That and following up. And because when you follow up, and the reason I say that is because as a mentor, if my mentee is consistently following up with me, right, I feel like this is, an engaging relationship, right? It's not a once a month, once every 2 months. I'm feeling connected. I'm watching the progress. I'm able to give input, perspective, value offline, which then you can implement and iterate your thinking along the way, right? That's the one thing. Another thing I would say is to set up a mastermind, right? in your network, you will have people from different walks of life, right? And I would assume none of them are part of a mastermind at the moment, right? So anyone that you would call and say, hey, you know what? I've got this idea. I'd like to form a mastermind. We meet on a monthly basis, and there's a very clear agenda, right? This is what we're trying to achieve. Would you be interested? 99% of the time, in my experience, right, they say yes immediately, right? And when you bring a group of people together and discuss challenges and opportunities, it opens new dimensions, new portals. And so, you know, the power of a mastermind group cannot be overstated enough.
Have you been able to create one yourself?
I have two running at the moment.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How do you qualify people that you want to be in the mastermind? So how do your invites go out? Who do your invites go out to? Are these peers? Are you very careful in having like a perfect vision of you fit well into this? You don't fit well into this. I'm not going to invite you.
Yeah.
What is the difference between person who fits the
So
description?
it depends on the mastermind,
Yeah.
right? But the most important metric or the most important criteria, I would say, is commitment, right? You're someone you can see who is constantly learning and growing. I'm generalizing across all industries.
Yeah.
You would look at someone who has that hunger, that thirst to learn, right? Curiosity, I think, is essential, right? Because when you bring 7 people together that are all really curious,
Is that the magic number? 7?
7 to 8, I would say, is the right number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, I'd say 7 to 8. You bring 7 to 8 people who are really curious about a specific topic, a specific problem, and you know, you start seeing perspectives, and it starts opening doors and portals that you know, and you're able to accelerate your thinking and your growth
Yeah.
in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the vision of people who will not fit, I mean, values, I think, is important.
Yeah.
You need to understand everyone's values, right? That's something I learned in my entrepreneurial journey. Like something I never really asked myself. I wonder what his values are, right? Or I wonder what my principal's values are, my partner's values are, or my team, my employees. What are their values? I'm big on values. I think values. Spending the time to think about values and understanding the other person's values, you know, saves so much more time later when challenges come up, right? Because when there's an alignment of values, you're able to work through them a lot quicker.
Your decision making
Your
gets
decision
faster and
making, your
improves.
problem solving, your conflict, right? Everything that comes up in a journey becomes a lot easier. There's no friction, right? Well, there is friction, but it gets unlocked very quickly because there's an alignment in values.
Yeah. And when you compromise your values, your body gives you the signal right away too.
Absolutely.
You start to feel
Absolutely.
it. Only if you're sure about your values.
Yeah.
So.
And values is one of those things wherein, you know, last week you asked me before we started taping, you asked me about taping. Is that the word?
Recording, taping, sure.
Taping,
Yeah,
old
taping's
school,
cool.
taping.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, you asked me how my week's been, and I told you, you know, it's been a crazy week in a good way.
It's only Monday now.
Well, sorry, I'm referring to last week.
Yeah, sure.
I had an 84-hour week, which I haven't had in a while. Yeah.
I don't stay awake for that long.
Yeah. It was one of those weeks.
Yeah.
And you know, I was doing a series of workshops, and one of the things that kept coming up, and something I've been thinking so much about this week, is this topic of values. Because when you get in front of people who've been doing business leadership for a number of years, and you ask them, okay, what are your values? They know they have values, but they've actually never taken the time to write it down. And once they write it down, you know, I always say that there are people who are really productive. You know, people in your network who, you know, for some reason, they're just getting a lot done, right? How is it that he or she gets so much done, while the rest of us, right, are not as productive. But the reality is everyone's got 24 hours, right? But when you probe further and you peel the layers, those people who are getting a lot done, there are two things that they're really clear on. First thing is they're really clear on their values. And the second is their priorities. And everything that comes in, like the modern challenge that we're all facing, the biggest problem that we're all facing right now is distraction, right? There's just so much, everything is designed to hijack your attention, right? Literally everything. And when you have all these things coming in and when it's going through the filter of values and priorities, you're able to say no a lot easier or a lot quicker. Right?
Yeah.
Things don't even really register as much when they go through those filters because you are very clear on what the values are and what the priorities are. Subconsciously, you're asking yourself, is this aligned with my values? Is this aligned with my priorities?
Yeah.
And it unlocks that next level of focus and productivity.
What about, I'll challenge that slightly, but what about conflicting values? Because I'll give the context to this. Two words I want to use in setting up the context is being content and being discontent. So you talked about some of these entrepreneurs that are doing really well, getting more done, reaching new heights, scaling new heights. They're setting the bar. They're the examples everyone talks about.
The celebrities we celebrate.
Yeah, but we don't, like Alina and I, for example, don't relate to a lot of them because, as you said, our values are different. We are wary of the fact that some of these people don't even know their values. You can be successful without knowing your values. You're just burning the midnight oil and you're giving up on your health or something like that, but you're still scaling mountains. Like it potentially is true, right? Like you can not have a clear look at your values and you're still like getting all the material success in the world. You're hitting your revenue numbers, you're getting wealthier, you have more things.
One dimension.
A certain
On
dimension.
one dimension, yeah.
One certain dimension. Yeah. And Lena and I start to think about like, hey, we want that success too, but not at the expense of our values. And we get into this kind of circle, like, but when we write our values down, it actually deters us from going into that burnout route. So like I would say no to an 84-hour work week any day, regardless of what opportunity comes my way, because of my value for balance, for example, and the way I define balance for myself, at least on how I see that thing. So we started looking at these people and we started thinking about, are we wrong to be content with what we have versus having a healthy amount of discontent, which is kind of driving, or what we're seeing from our lenses here of other people, like an unhealthy or healthy amount of discontent that is driving people to do these crazy things, scale larger, move faster, take more risks, burn themselves out, let go of their health. And we just look at these two and like, and for a year, for example, we looked at ourselves and we said, we're not working hard enough. That's our problem. We need to have 80-hour weeks. We're not hustling hard enough. We need to hustle more. We need to talk to more people. We need to schmooze. We need to get around the city and do all those things. And it felt
network.
Icky. Network. It felt icky. It felt icky for a whole year. Our gut was upset. Our health went bad, and we were just trying to do it, and it wasn't true to ourselves. So then we did a reset, and now we're trying to reconcile. Like, don't I need a bit of discontent? Like, have I figured out contentness really early in my journey of doing business, or should I have gone through a super burnout phase to get successful and then come back to that? Like, I guess my question summarized would be: is it important to burn out to succeed?
No, it's not. It's not. You don't have to burn out to succeed.
Yeah.
But what we see in mainstream media, what's trending, are those stories, right? But having said that, you can learn from those stories. You can learn from the entrepreneur that burnt out, right?
Yeah.
And you can calibrate accordingly. But ultimately, Naeem, I think what it comes down to, and what I've learned in my journey, is that what is it that you want, right? You can have everything, right? You can have everything, but one thing at a time. You can have balance, all the balance you want in life, but that's all you're going to get. You can have that next level hustle, kind of success, the 85-hour week and everything that comes with that, but you can't have balance at the same time, right? So ultimately, it really does come down to what is it that you want and why do you want it, right? Because the why is key, right? Most whys or most goals are not achieved because we're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? We're doing it because we want to validate ourselves, for example, right? Or we want to, live up to a certain expectation or certain persona that may have been conditioned and programmed into us by media, friends, people around us. And those goals they lead to burnout. So I think being really clear on what you want and why you want it, right, is the path. It's the path that leads you to true success. And it's trite, right? It's trite. What is true success, right? What does that really mean?
I'm reading my notes because that's literally my next question. How should I be measuring success? What is success? How do I measure success?
Deep question. It's very subjective. I think true success is having a calm mind. It's not the answer you probably expected me to say.
It is. It 100% is.
But that's where I am. For me, that's success. Like when I can wake up and I have a calm mind, like it's priceless.
It's part of my daily prayers, like
feels
asking for that.
Yeah.
Even if I'm not there yet, I felt it before and I want more of that.
Yeah.
Because
ultimately, when you don't have a calm mind, then we have that narrative, right? I need to work harder. Like you said, we're not working hard enough. We're not choosing. We're not networking. We're not doing all these things that they're doing, right?
Yeah.
That's not a calm mind, right? So now you're in reactive mode, right? You're trying to react and create something out there and the trade is that you're trying to do something out there at the cost of something in here.
Yeah.
Right? But when you have a calm mind, you wake up and everything is, because reality is neutral. Reality is neutral. It's the meaning that we give reality, right? That then creates our suffering.
It is true. It is true. And it just goes back to your point on really that attention problem that we have, and that we're consuming so much information, we're being distracted, and part of the distraction is messaging that keeps us discontent with and makes us think that what reality that we want or we might already have, but we think we don't have, and then we go out chasing. So I've been on this podcast, I've had, I think your episode 26, 27, every single episode I've mentioned this, so my audience really bored at this point, but just to give you perspective, I thought about the reasons why I do business, and this is just one part of my life. Why I do business, 3 reasons. 1, to have the lifestyle that I want. That means choosing to spend my time in the way that I want, with people that I want, doing what I want. Number 2 is money, not the first, not the last, but it's an economic enterprise. It needs to pay the bills and it needs to support the lifestyle. Number 3 is creativity. It needs to be something creative. This, for example, is something creative. And I figure that if I have 2 of these 3 going at any given point, I'm a happy man with a calm mind. So if I have lifestyle and money going, pretty well, and I don't have creativity, I'm okay, because at least I have 2 of the 3 going in. If I have money and creativity going in, but no lifestyle, I should be happy, because if I'm doing 80 hours a week of creative work, I would love that.
Yeah.
If I have lifestyle and creativity, but less money, then I'm leading the life of like an artist, which to me is like honorable as well. And someday, when I have phases like these, it goes. So every time I get into a funk, it's mostly because 2 out of the 3 are not working. Because the lifestyle is not there and the money's not there, and only creativity is left. Yeah. I'm just at 1. So.
But how often is that?
It really depends. It's not predictable kind of pattern, as life is so unpredictable and business and environment is so unpredictable.
But there is a shift at least at the starting age of my business, every 3, 4, 6 months. Every 6 months, at least there's one thing that kind of turns off. We're like, I'm out for now. Deal with the other 2. A couple of times it's been 2 of them have been off, and we've been very close to shutting it all down. Be like, why even bother?
Yeah.
Why even bother doing this, right? But yeah, this whole measuring success for ourselves, as I told you before we started recording, Alina's really that peace of mind, that calm that happened to her after she listened to you speak last week at the EOA session. And we've been trying to live our true self through our business as much as we can. And with that same goal. So that when you say it, that's not the answer I wanted to hear about a calm mind.
Yeah.
We're totally on board. It might come at the expense of being, the $1 billion company or the thing, but that's our values. We're fine with that.
As long as you know exactly what you want, right?
Yeah.
And you have alignment between the 2 of you, that's key.
Yeah.
That's key. Where I see friction is where one partner wants one thing and the other wants something completely different, right?
And we've been there too. There have been times where she's been more hustle, and I've been like more, let's take it slower, let's improve over time, Kaizen, minimum improvements over time.
Yeah.
And there's times where I'm just off the hook and she's like, no, we got a good thing going. I was like, no, it needs to be bigger.
Yeah.
How many clients do we have? 12? Get 24.
Yeah. But let me ask you something. Do you enjoy this?
Enjoy what?
Having this conversation?
I love it.
Okay.
I will be doing this for the next 30 years or until I'm dead.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. Do you want to have a $1 billion business?
Not necessarily. It's contextual.
Do you think if you had a $1 billion business, you could be doing this?
Probably.
You would still be doing this?
Probably, yes. 100%.
I look at people who I know who are running $1 billion businesses.
Yeah.
And this is not to say that there's anything wrong with it. Who knows what's right or wrong?
Yeah.
Right? But I noticed that they don't own their time. They just don't own their time. We think of, one of the reasons I got into entrepreneurship was because of financial freedom and time freedom, right? For me, I wanted to own my own time, right? That to me, like Warren Buffett is a mentor. He's, I've been a disciple for many years. And one thing that I'll never forget, he says, I look at my calendar and I've got no appointments. I can do whatever I want. Like that to me is success. That to me is winning.
Yeah.
Right? And I look at people who I know, I look at people, in my circle who've gotten to that level of success. They wouldn't be able to do this.
But they're time poor.
Yeah. I mean, their phone is ringing off the hook.
I see it.
Yeah.
I see it.
There's
evening events, morning events, like always call after a message, after a call, after a message.
Because once you've got that, then it's got to be maintained, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just stay there.
Yeah. And that's what we're realizing pretty early on in our journey. And we're novice, right? We're 3 years old into entrepreneurship. And we're constantly fighting this battle of knowing the truth of what you're saying is that what's the point of being money rich and time poor and balancing that. Well, it's easy to say that after you have $1 billion. Like because you need to have a certain amount of money to be able to afford that lifestyle. But let's dig into that because I want to talk about that too. Financial freedom, you mentioned that. What does that mean to you? Because I've talked about financial freedom in my head for 5 years before talking to anyone else about it. I started reading about it and had conversations in my own head. And I started asking people, and it means different things to different people. For some people, it's a number. For some people, it's an experience. For some people, it's completely different. Mine still has figures attached to it. But how do you think of financial freedom? Was it building on to what you've said, like an open calendar, or like, for example, I think it was Naval Ravikant who's like, I don't set alarms. Like, no need for alarms. That's the kind of life that would be a good life. But what does financial freedom mean to you? Or what did it mean to you previously, and what does it mean to you today, if there has been a contrast in your definition of that?
Previously, it used to be a number. Very clear, measurable number.
How much was it? What did you put the number as?
It was a big number.
$6?
It was much bigger than what I thought would bring me financial freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went from having a number to now having a number, right, which is quantifiable, it's measurable, and having a feeling around it. A feeling of, oh, you know what? I want to go to Denver next week. I'm going to go to Denver next week, right? Having that freedom to be able to do what you want, when you want to do it, to me feels like financial freedom. Like that to me means like I'm financially free. I don't have to be at a desk or setting an alarm. So now it's a number and a feeling. It's these two.
It's almost like an experience, right? Like that's when I hear answers that's just a number, it seems very empty. But what you're describing is more of an experience of living.
Yeah, I feel like it balances it, right?
Yeah.
Because the number can change.
Yeah.
Let's face it, the mind is fickle, right?
Yeah.
The number today is not going to be the number next week. It may not
True.
be the number a year from now,
Yeah.
right? And that's the battleground, right?
Yeah.
But when you wrap a feeling around it, now you have, something that can be quantified, right? And something that can be felt. So it's basically this connection between the mind and the heart, and now it's much deeper.
Yeah.
So you may not have the number, but you can feel financially free, even if you're not there yet. So I don't have to wait for a number
Yeah.
to hit a number to feel it.
Yeah.
I feel it right now. I feel it at this moment,
Yeah.
right?
I remember reading somewhere at some point in college, you ran out of your allowance, and you didn't have money for laundry.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Where did you find that?
Dude,
Oh,
I do my research, all right? I know everything about you. I think you went and got some part-time jobs.
I did. I had a couple of part-time jobs.
And, just going from that $10 I wanted to do my laundry to getting jobs and feeling financially free at that point too. Because I had a similar experience that when I got my first part-time jobs in university, I felt like the king. I felt on top of the world. I was making minimum wage.
Yeah.
I was flipping chicken in Popeye's restaurants in the back, I was just deep frying lots of chicken full of carcinogens and feeding it to people. But like, I felt so good. And, they were paying me, because I was an international student, they were paying me in cash. So I got cash every week.
Yeah.
But I felt so free. I felt like, I don't need to ask for pocket money or allowance. I'm doing this my own. All my friends are, kind of still living, and I can make those decisions. Like, if I walk into the grocery store and I want to buy a pack of gum,
buy it.
Pack of gum.
Yeah,
I'm
done.
the king, right? And similarly, Alina had, when we were in Toronto, she quit her advertising gig at one point. She was working for the large agencies at some point, and she just had an awakening. And she wanted to become a nutritionist, and she went and got her diploma, studied all about gut health. To this day, she's a walking encyclopedia of nutrition.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I'm going to pick her brain next time I see her.
Yeah, she has multiple lives, as do we. We're Batman and Robin together. But there was a point where she was working retail. So she was, university graduate, top school in Canada, did like top agency in Canada, and then working at a retail store for minimum wage. She felt so free and happy. And money had nothing to do with it. It was more of the experience and the feeling like I get to do X, Y, Z, or I get to do, there are some things out of my reach, but I decided not to have that in my reach for at least this phase of my life. So that's a constant battle that we're in with our, for example, agency, right? When we have a clear direction on what not to do, which is I don't want a office tower, like an ivory tower agency, which has 400 cubicles, 600 employees, 3 coffee machines, and like stuff on the walls. Like we don't see that.
Yeah.
We see
that doesn't align with the values.
It doesn't, but we see a small, nimble, highly profitable, soul-led ad agency with people that we want in it and clients that only we want. We're happy to say no to a few things, and hopefully that gets us to where we need to get, and adjust our hustle and network goals accordingly. I wanted to ask you, so risk taking,
Yes.
something that I face as a question almost every day. And by nature, entrepreneurs are daily risk takers almost, right? Whether it's a new business, existing business. And I'll give you a bit more context. I didn't grow up in a very risk-friendly environment. We were raised to be, climb the corporate ladder, do this. There's a path set out for you. Don't deviate too much from it.
Yeah. Do what works.
Do what works.
Predictable.
Yeah, you put in one, you get one. That's the kind of thing you need to do. And part of that risk taking is you put in one, you get 10, or you put in one, you get 0.
Yeah.
So I've been conditioned for a long, long, long time to put in one and get one, and that's the only game we play. Up until we started our own business, and I've been starting to feel the effects of risk in my gut too. So I'm looking for frameworks. I'm looking for mental models. I'm looking for heuristics on how does someone identify what is a good risk to take.
Yeah.
When you're taking a bet, how do you quantify and qualify for yourself? Like, this is a bet worth taking in business, especially. What have you learned over your last few decades of?
So I'll give you a framework, and I'll give you a heuristic, something that is more on the emotional side, right? So when I look at risk in most businesses that I've started, I would look at what's the worst case scenario. Always. What's the worst case in this situation? And the reason I look at the worst case, and something that I've only understood recently, the worst case approach has always been the approach, right? It's like, okay, what's the maximum I can lose in here? When I was in consulting in the Valley, in the beginning of my career, I was working for, as I mentioned earlier, right, this firm Susquehanna, and the first few months we had to play poker every single day because the founder saw parallels between poker and options trading. So I started learning about risk from that perspective. Okay, what is the worst case, right? And am I able to shoulder the worst case? And if so, then let's go, right? It was that simple. Something that I've started weaving in more recently is when we look at risk, we think about it especially from a business perspective. There's a little bit of fear that sets in, right? Like, I'm losing time, I'm losing capital, there's opportunity cost, right? There's status lost potentially, right? Reputation loss, right? Yeah. These are all very real things, right? And the heuristic is imagining the worst case, right? The worst case scenario. And then, so I'll give you an example. When I was looking at getting into retail, I got into retail. We had a 50-year-old brand that we started going all in on in this market. We started opening stores in malls. And I asked myself, okay, this plan is a 5-year plan, right? And over 5 years, we would have had to invest, I personally would have had to invest close to $3 million, right? And I asked myself, okay, can I break this down, right? Can I look at this from a 1-year perspective? And if I can, what's the exit, right? If I'm not able to get to year 2, right, because the model's not working, the Excel spreadsheet isn't really performing the way it should have performed, right? Do I have an exit? So putting in circuit breakers along the way that allowed me to exit in the event I couldn't parlay or move on to the next level, right?
I like that circuit breaker.
And then thinking of the worst case scenario and really embracing it, right? Because Naeem, one thing I've found is that when we embrace the worst case, right, now all of a sudden you have envisioned what you fear. And when you are intimate, really intimate with what's causing anxiety in your system, right, you take its power away. It almost dissolves because now you've thought about it, you know what it looks like, You know what it's going to feel like. You can see it, you can hear it. And now it's not as much of, it's not bringing that level of anxiety and fear anymore because you've gone through that process of thinking about it. So the risk in my mind, because to me, risk is, yes, there's external risk. There's also the narrative that we create in our own minds, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the risk associated with certain investments that we make and certain businesses that we start, right? It's the story that we're telling ourselves.
Absolutely. And like the sound that I have in my mouth is, you idiot, when I make certain decisions that didn't work out.
But then if you peel that further, okay, so you're calling yourself an idiot, but so what? Like, then what? Why?
But it goes into, I love this, a therapy session. It goes into future decisions, and I become a bit more cowardly for future decisions. Because it starts with like, you're an idiot, you made the wrong move. And then it goes into, you shouldn't be allowed to make risky decisions. So just check with someone else who has a better brain and then do that. And then I've done some CBT in the past. So like now when I get into this loop, I get into that first question. It's like, do you have any proof that you're an idiot? But it takes me a while.
What's the evidence?
What's the evidence? Like, what's any hardcore evidence? And usually there is none. I'm not that bad. But there is some time of variance within my own like mood going up and down that I'm not very happy with. Because the numbers, okay, let's talk about the numbers. The numbers are workable. You can have circuit breakers, they're clear markers. You know if something's going to work or not going to work.
Do you know if something's going to work or not?
No, on paper.
On paper, it's always on. But
on paper.
But every plan that I've seen in my career, every plan has never performed relative to reality.
Never has.
Never.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's not even close.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, now, yes, I have the experience to make sure that I discount significantly. But then when you discount significantly, you're also asking yourself, well, am I playing not to lose or am I playing to win?
Yeah.
Right? Am I putting, limits on the potential by not, gearing the spreadsheet to what it's capable of, right? Based on what I'm seeing in this business or what I would like it to be.
Yeah.
Am I not hustling enough? Am I not going to push hard enough?
Like, don't I believe in this enough?
Don't I believe in this or believe in myself enough?
Yeah, for like example, the one that I was telling you off cam, I did a low, medium, and high case in terms of how profitable or potentially well off it can be. I can't stop staring at the high. Like, wow, this can be super fun and good if it works out.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, I look at the low and be like, why are you doing this? So I think it's more about
why are you doing it?
It's the emotional regulation of risk that I think I struggle with the most. And maybe not to talk for everyone else in my audience, but I think that is a thing that needs most work.
Yeah.
Is your own emotional regulation around risk.
Especially for entrepreneurs. I think the single most important thing that I had to do as an entrepreneur is manage my own psychology first, right? I mean, do you listen to the podcast Masters of Scale?
No.
Okay, there's a podcast by Reid Hoffman. It's a great podcast, and in the beginning, there's the jingle in the beginning, and one of the ladies was saying, or one of the female entrepreneurs said, you're leaving the office, and there's a fire in the office, and you're leaving. And that's just the life of an entrepreneur. And you have to be able to leave the office knowing there's a fire, right? Because the fire is going to keep burning anyway, but you have to be able to disconnect.
I'm just visualizing that right now. I would want to put it out.
Yeah, but what if you can't put it out in that moment and there's some dependencies, right?
Yeah.
And it's time bound and you're waiting on some. I mean, it's never that simple.
Yeah.
Right? It's never that simple. So going back to the retail business, I looked at it from a 3-year perspective, but after year 1, the market had turned. And we were a single brand, right? in a mall, we had a single brand, while our competitors had 40, 50 brands in the portfolio. So when the market turned and we needed to renegotiate our lease, like the landlord wouldn't even take us, seriously. They were like, okay, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Right? So it's a good thing I had those circuit breakers in place, because if I did not have circuit breakers or if I did not have an exit, then we would have had to continue running that game for another 3 years, knowing that it was going south, right?
I don't know if this counts as a circuit breaker. So what I've done, instead of like the numbers, and tell me what you think about this, is I made a sheet with 200 boxes. So for the new venture, I've given myself 200 days as my first circuit breaker, like 6 months from now. And for every day, I just exit out and I look at it every day. I'm like, just keep in check how far I am into this whole thing. But it's like visually causing me to think, okay, 5% of your time is done. I'm on day 15 now of this whole journey out of the 200 days.
Yeah.
So that's, we're closing in on 10%. So,
that's great.
So let's see if that like drives any emotions in it.
And?
So far, it's making me nervous. You can tell. But
nervous or excited?
They're the same emotion, aren't they? For me, they've always almost been the same emotion: nervousness and excitement. Like I am nervous before coming to an interview, even though I've done 26 of these and I've talked for a living. But I'm nervous before. But I've learned to understand that nervousness is through my excitement.
Yeah, you're nervous because you care.
Yeah.
You care,
yes, I do.
Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to being nervous because, there's emotions that, because of non-belief, for example, right? In yourself, or, there are secrets, or there's something that, it's not for the right reason, for example. You don't have a clear why, right? Or you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I felt that going into some prospect meetings that I didn't want to work with. So I thanks for that, because now I can put those two separately. That nervousness of going into a studio, being able to talk to you for a couple of hours versus going to a prospect that's not going to be good for me, even though they have the money.
Yeah.
But it goes against my values to bring them on.
Yeah.
And that nervousness physically feels...
You feel it.
Physically
in the
feels
body.
very different. Yeah. Okay, well, let's see if my circuit breaker. I'll keep you in the loop every 3 months. I'm losing my mind then. I got to notice that we are close to wrapping up. I usually do a rapid fire before we wrap up. You can't think; you have to answer.
All right,
immediately. Let's go. But I think we do have to have a round 2 at some point. There's so much I want to talk to you about and dig in deeper. We haven't even talked about your favorite failures. Yet, and we never got to talk about your guilt, which I do want to bear it for all. We'll make great content.
Round 2.
we'll do a round 2, but let's do a rapid fire. Let's start with something very difficult. Okay, ice cream or gelato?
Gelato.
Good, same. This one's easy. Exciting flexibility that leads to volatile results, or boring consistency that leads to sure results?
The first.
Yeah?
Always.
Ties into our risk-taking.
Absolutely.
Because you know your worst case.
You know your worst case.
I like it.
Yeah.
Number 3, spa day or shopping?
Spa day.
Same. If you had $50,000 to invest right now, where would you put it?
$50,000 to invest right now, where would I put it?
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
All of it.
All of it.
Okay. Please don't take investment advice from non-professionals. Take your own risk. Whatever that thing that you have to say after that, right? This is not investment advice. This is not investment advice. Don't come
especially not from Naeem.
You can't sue Dhiren. Can't sue my first business. Can't sue me. If you weren't living in Dubai, or the Philippines, or the Bay Area, or anywhere else you've lived,
I love how you've done your homework. You're very thorough.
Where would you be?
I would be in Bali.
Huh. Have you been recently?
Not recently, but it's my imagination has been to Bali a few times recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we think about, we romanticize the idea of having a place in Bali as a retirement getaway. at some point. Yeah.
Where in Bali?
In Bali.
Anywhere in Bali?
Where in,
Ubud, Seminyak.
yeah, Ubud, both of them,
Yeah.
really. But Ubud, yeah, Ubud has that, it's such a powerful energy vortex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I disagree, but
You disagree?
yeah. We went last year. I didn't like it.
No?
Too many tourists. That's why I
Yeah.
asked if have you been recently? Because I
No, I
think
haven't been
it
recently.
might have changed because we went because we heard we're digital nomads, right?
Yeah.
We can literally become one if we
Yeah.
wanted to. We both went, Alina and I, last year. Just too many flip flops and too many people. no one's taking work seriously,
Interesting.
and we like work.
Yeah.
But let's see. Favorite Netflix show or TV show of all time, not released this year.
Of all time.
Of all time.
You know, I started rewatching The Last Dance. I'm a
seen it.
huge Michael Jordan fan.
Oh, The Last Stand, the document. Okay.
The documentary. Yeah.
And then it got personal.
Yeah. And then have you been following it?
No, I saw it once. I just find those moments hilarious.
Yeah.
When every time he's like, and then I took it personally. That's a good one.
Another
a lot
one.
Of lessons. in
Another one would be House of Cards.
that. Spacey.
Spacey.
Kevin
Kevin
Spacey,
Spacey.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a great show. I
was.
was hooked. I don't usually watch shows.
This is how I make my list of what I want to watch next. I just ask people.
Yeah.
The one book every business owner should read.
The one book every business owner should read is not a business book.
Good.
It's Breaking the Habit of Being You.
Never heard of this one. Who's this by?
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Mr. Dispenza. Dispensing that wisdom. Breaking the habit of being you.
Yeah.
I'm already sold on the title. If you were to stop being an entrepreneur, what would you be doing? Right. Wave a magic wand and you can't be an entrepreneur
You know, I've
anymore.
always wanted to be a professor.
Huh.
Yeah.
What would you be teaching?
I would be teaching economics or philosophy.
Macro or micro?
Micro. Yeah. Or philosophy. But yeah, just the idea of being able to learn.
Yeah, it's a job that you get paid to learn.
Yeah. I mean, my learning journey started a little late. And when I realized that that was something I wanted to do,
Yeah.
you know, I was making great money
Yeah.
in consulting. And, you know, it's like the paycheck or follow your passion. But it's
Yeah.
interesting how I've come full circle because now, you know, with the executive coaching,
Yeah.
in many ways, I feel like, you know, I'm constantly learning, not just from attending workshops and retreats, but also from my clients,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sharing knowledge and I'm sharing my experience. So it's not professor in the traditional sense, but
Yeah.
but it's along the same lines. It has a nice feel to it.
Hey, look, I planted a seed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I feel the same way about, for example, this podcast, right? Like I get to talk to people while learning from them. And then vicariously people who are listening or watching get to learn as well. And this kind of fuels in thoughts for me. Like I'll go and pick up that book right after this and improve my own knowledge after that too.
Yeah.
And to be able to get paid to do that is brilliant. It's a
Yeah.
good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any final words for an audience of entrepreneurs? And while you think of that, I mean, there's so much. I wanted to talk to you about your coaching business. I'm really interested in like the whole economics of a coaching business because it partially doesn't make sense to me and partially
Which
it really
part?
does. The fact that a coaching business is you, right? You're
It's not scalable.
yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how do you scale? Literally, are you reading my notes? look at this question. So, how do you scale a one-person brand? Your hours in the day are limited. You can't be in two places at a certain given time. But I'm starting to sense that it's not about that. It's about impact more than money for you. But that's a round two discussion because I think we can go into it
All right.
for a good 2 hours.
I'll control myself. Exercise restraint.
Yeah, exercise. Come on, hold you there. Turn his mic off. No, but what would be your if there's one piece that you want to tell an audience of entrepreneurs, people who've been in the game for 20 years, people who are just starting out, if there's any message you'd like to parlay to them, your final words on this episode, what would you say to
Final
them?
words for entrepreneurs, I would say, would be to be really clear on why, right? Being really, really, look, being an entrepreneur is a tough journey, right? Things are breaking, things are on fire as you're going home. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. It takes a special breed of human to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers, they're dreamers, they're visionaries, right? Entrepreneurs are constantly living at the edge of their comfort zone, right? They have this burning desire to take their life to the next level. And there's all this distraction and temptation to live that lifestyle or to go all in and hustle, right? To get what we want. But at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, why? Like, why do you want that? Like, really be honest with yourself as to why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Right?
I love it.
I mean, and when you're clear on the why, it brings an immense amount of clarity. Like, you asked me earlier about this journey that I'm on. It's because I have a very clear why as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I'm not even thinking about the scale aspect of it. Yeah, it's definitely something that is important, but I think that will come, right? That will come. Just like, you're living your values, right? You will achieve your goals. It'll come, right? But in the meantime, you have this calm mind. So it's this balance between being interested and obsessed, right? Like, we get obsessed, and I'm all for obsession, but if you're going to be obsessed for the right reasons.
I like that. And if I can just add before a closing thought, it's also like knowing that why. What I'm starting to realize is it becomes apparently very important when things aren't going too well. That why kind of pulls you out, because if you don't have a clear why and things start going south, whether it's revenue or health or whatever, and you forget your why or you never had one, it's hard to recover from it.
Absolutely.
Or almost next to impossible to recover from it. That's what's got Alina and I through some of these, like, it's only been 3 years, but these tough times that when you remember, like, why are we doing this? We're such masochists. Self-inflicting all this pain. Why are we doing this?
But it's fuel for the rocket.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when the rocket...
Or it's a Band-Aid for when you're not feeling too good.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah.
And you need both.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Dhiren, man, we should have round 3. There's so much to talk about. So glad and grateful to be in your company. I've heard tons of good things about you from Alina. Now I know why.
Thank you.
And hope to keep following your journey as well and see how you scale your coaching business. I'm joking. We'll talk about that one later.
No offense to the coaches.
No offense to the coaches. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I wish you even more success.
Thank you.
I watched a few episodes, and I've spoken to a few people who've watched episodes, and people who've been on the seat, and they say that you have this flair and a way to make people feel comfortable. And now I know what they were talking about. So keep leaning in on that skill, that strength, that gift, all of the above. Wish you even more success.
Dude,
on
I'm
your
going to
journey.
be floating on clouds on the way home.
All right.
Thanks
good
so
stuff.
much for that. Thanks, man. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.